This is Patricia Huddle, and welcome to the fourth segment. And I appreciate you watching if you want to see this in a little bit more detail. If you were watching me closely in the last movie, you know that I had mentioned about making an action script layer, and I meant to say actions, but I didn't. And whenever I was using the code snippets, it automatically created an actions layer for me. And I really want to have the actions layer, but I went to all the trouble in the previous movie of putting in the individual keyframes. So I'm just taking my actions script layer, you saw me rename it, and I'm going to take that code and just drag it into that layer, which I obviously didn't like. So I'm going to go and open up my actions panel, and I'm going to use the contextual menu, which is Control on the keyframe, and hit Actions. I'm going to copy this. You can't have actions live on the multiple layers. So, I mean, you can have different actions living on multiple layers, but you don't want the same ones in there twice. So I'm going to delete that layer, and then on this frame, I'm going to bring up my actions and hit paste. And I also know that sometimes it's difficult to see all the coding. I'm going to go into my preferences, and under my code editor, I'm going to up the size of this to 14 point so that's a little bit easier to see. And that's something that you can do yourself to make it easier whenever you're coding. I'm going to just collapse the window using the arrows, and we can see the actions window stays up here, and that's convenient. So I'm going to go through, and as I said, I'm going to go through and add the additional script in here. So if you want to see how this comes together, and I'll try to do this quickly so as not to bore you, but obviously I want you to be able to follow along. So I'm selecting my next button here, which is the one that goes to the credits. I can either go back to the window menu and go to actions, or the reason that I left this here was just so that I could open up the window automatically and be able to address my code snippets, timeline navigation. It's the second one down. Click to go to a frame and stop. Notice it puts all that commenting in, and I just eliminate that because I find it very annoying. When you are using frame label names, you must put the names in quotations because they are technically referred to as strings, and so they must be in quotes. If you use frame numbers, you can simply use the number, the integer by itself, and that's fine. And something else that you can do, it's not required, but I think it's a good practice if you're going to be using the code snippets a lot, and you want to make your movie easier to understand later, is to actually go back through and change your function names to things that are meaningful, as opposed to just this FL, click to, go to, and stop. They all come up that way, and all of them will be numbered sequentially 1, 2, 3. It is a better practice to actually call these what they are. So I typically use a name, something like go to, this is play. So I'm going to call that one go to play. And if I do change the name up here, I have to change it down here as well. Actually, I should call this how to play because that's what I've been calling it everywhere else. And it doesn't want to copy and paste, So I'll just type it. Go to how to play. And change this one as go to credits. And you can test the movie out as you go along. It's not necessary. Oh, it literally pasted my script there. You know, if you want to make sure that everything's working, you know, by all means, do the test movie, which is under Control, Test. Oh, okay, and I see that I'm having an error, and that happens. So if something happens in Flash that nothing works, you know, the whole movie just goes crazy, it means you have a code problem. So let's take a look at what's going on here. It told me that there was an undefined function, and the problem is that this is asking for go to credits, and down here I left out the O and I left the S off of credits. I didn't spell it right. Even if you use the format code, which will align all your code very neatly, it will not find those kinds of spelling errors. So now I'm going to do another test movie. And I can see there are no compiler errors this time, which is good. I'm going to drag this into my screen here just so that it always stays. We can see that that goes to the credits, so that's working. So the benefit of testing out all the buttons as you go, or at least screen by screen, is that if you do make some errors, you're going to be able to quickly track them versus having your you know, your file have all of the errors in, and you know, I have to troubleshoot errors ending up on like 9 frames. And I haven't saved this since I've added all the code in here, so I'm going to save this as prototype, and since it was still untitled, I'm going to call it version 1. I'm wanting to save this to my desktop because that's where I've been saving everything else. I don't have to add the extension. It will add it for me. And then move on to my next screen and really follow the same procedure. But this is my home button, and I'm going to change my function name because I think it looks more professional. Just change that here. Go to home, both of those, and send this to back to home. Now, if you start feeling more comfortable with understanding what's happening with the coding, and you feel like going through the code snippets is just taking too long, you are encouraged to take the code that was pre-written for you. You can copy that, paste it in. Okay, it's not really liking me doing copy and paste. Not sure why. I'm going to give it one more shot. Whoops. Okay, it really didn't like that. Well, I know what I did. So try the contextual menu, and it likes that fine. Okay, so The first one that I had spoke to in here was the home button, so I'll just change that. And this is, to me, this is actually faster now that I know what I'm supposed to do. Let's just see, this looks like it's an issue of the contextual menu. Okay, so it's fine if I use the contextual menu but not my keyboard for some reason. Okay, and down here, this next one that I'm attaching a script to is my select level. So I'm going to call it select. Say go to select. Go to select. And, you know, I can't remember what that location's name is that I gave it. So I can have one of two ways that I can deal with this. I can select back on the labels layer, and I see that it's actually this screen that I called ready. The other thing that I could do is, like I said, if I just really needed to get through this and I didn't want to go and check out the label name, I know that this is on frame 3. And if you're ever wondering about the frame numbers, of course you can count, but if you put the frame indicator, that's the red line, inside of the cell that you're at the bottom of the screen, you can see there is the number 3 right here, and that tells me what frame I'm on. So you don't really have to count. If I click here, now it's number 7. That's how I know that I'm on frame 7. So I want to go to this one. If I want to go to frame 3, instead of using the actual name, I can use the number 3 in here, and that will do the same thing. However, it's not as clear as actually saying that it's going to the ready screen, and that's why I typically use the names for that. But I would just proceed through the entire movie, adding my scripts on top of these various areas, whether I do copy and paste or use the code snippets. And we'll do one more here using the code snippets. So I have that block selected, code snippets, click to go to a frame, and this is my, it's my go to clue button, and I'm going to change the name on this to go to clue 1. And here also it shows me that I'm on my actions layer and that I'm on frame 3. If I can count and I know that the next one that's coming up is frame 4, then I can change that number. And I have to be honest, it's never good practice to mix numbers and titles. You should stick with one, and I would recommend that you stick with the titles of the frames. So that's it for on this one. I will finish this up and show you what the final product looks like in the next movie.